Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. On today's show, we have Chris Lewis. He is the CEO of Evergreen Applied Technologies. He's a graduate of Colorado State University. He's got some journalism stuff going on. He does web. He's got a little professional setup there I can see at his place there. So he does some web broadcasts and stuff. Post graduation, he specialized in business development, helping struggling businesses achieve profitability. He's played a major role at every competitive level. He's an amateur cyclist. He plays tennis. He coaches baseball and hockey, and he has 3 children. Maybe he's got a dog too. We're going to find out. All his social links will be posted on the getagriponlighting.com website, so you can check it out there if you want to follow him further after the show. But before we get there, we got to talk about Light Thing, Right Thing. We got to go to satco.com. That's SATCO.com, Greg Eric.
That's right. Bulbs, fixtures, decorative and functional. They got it all. Components. They're the complete lighting line. And on top of that, the service to back it. Mike and I have talked about it often where we'll just call them and ask them for something. And sure enough, they'll have it. And they'll get it to you right away, and the price will be great. So I'd check those guys out anytime.
Go to satco.com. That's SATCO.com. They do the light thing. They do the right thing. And, of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Go to naild.org to join us. That's right. For right now, what's happening, Chris?
Well, hey, real quick. Ironically, their catalog's sitting on my desk.
Beautiful.
Oh, perfect.
Like,
There you go.
Right there.
that was weird.
The extra promotion. So,
Yeah,
Chris,
that wasn't coordinated. Like,
it's awesome. In looking at your websites, and I put that plural, which we'll talk about, it appears you really handle everything lighting related, from manufacturing, distribution, and retail. Is there anything you can't do in lighting right now?
well, I think we're trying to push outside of lighting into technology, and that's sort of the next step. Is like, because lighting in it of itself is quite simplistic, but it's like, what can lighting do, and how can it change spaces, especially since we sort of had this COVID thing happen, and how it affected the sports arena, um, and so it's like, how does it functionally change space, and like, what can we do there? Like, that's the next step. Is, what does that mean? And I know that the catchphrase like IoT is very popular, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to anything specific. And so the question is, like, what does it do? Like, what does it do for me? How does it create revenue? I think that's the big thing that people want to know, is like, how does it create revenue? And there are some really cool things that we're sort of looking at in that next step of, like, how do we change spaces and utilize spaces to make them more interactive, to improve, what lighting technology can be.
Well,
So
you talked about next step. You talked about creating revenue. I think it's identifying what it is that the customer wants to buy. I mean,
for sure,
when you're talking about creating revenue, I mean, there's negative revenue and like, there's productivity sapping revenue that people can create. Those are called casinos, Facebook, Twitter. Like, these people are negative productivity engines. Okay, so they take time away, they addict people, video games, and all this kind of stuff. They add no positive element to anyone's life in the long run, but they are revenue generating. And I think what we want to do is steer the industry away from that kind of a revenue generating model and keep it to productivity increasing and helping people's lives. What do you propose that in that next step that does that?
so there's a couple of things, like, the one that we've taken a good look at, and we sort of were starting on it, but then shut it down like a little bit ways into COVID, because the construction phase just came to a standstill. But it had to do with artificial intelligence and sending people to specific places. So you can use lighting technology to dictate movement in spaces, and it's all psychological. So this has to do with, if you're in a space and say I'm in a retail environment, and one space is brighter than another, sort of like if you're in the grocery store, your eyeballs are called to the freezer case where the photosensor is not working, because that one's the only one that's lit on the aisle. And so you're inherently drawn to that space. The same function happens in a retail space. If you can use artificial intelligence to guide where people are standing and where they're moving, you can guide them to products. And so it's a very simple idea of saying, we're going to use this space and use a series of stereoscopic sensors to sort of judge where people are, where they're looking, and move them to a space by dictating what space is lit and what isn't.
So you're
So
talking about queuing.
essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very fundamental idea of that. And you could take it, if we go back to like the sports space, we can say, well, what's like the next step there? And it's how, a lot of people are doing this with technology now, but now it's like interactive. What does that space become? What is the fans, what is the fans interaction level within the space? Can they dictate what the lighting is in an arena? Do they have an effect on it? And you've seen that with some effects, like in the Olympics, where people are given bracelets. And then there's like an infrared system that highlights what bracelets are on and which ones are off, and the crowd becomes part of the scene. And that's sort of like a very low level way of doing it. The other way would be to give users the control, and sort of, it could be done by polls or by remotes or something as simple as an app, and then the landscape is changed, and it just creates a more dynamic element to a space where right now it's just static. There's
So hang
nothing
on, hang on.
happening.
Are you saying give the users control over other people using queuing?
Giving users control of the space, so not necessarily
No,
over
but
other
hang on a second.
people.
Here, we were talking. I just want to dive into this because, like, if you wanted people to go down aisle 3 instead of aisle 2, you could cue
Mm-hmm.
them to do that using lighting. That is known that we can do this. It's kind of like employing theatrical, but by then giving the actual person that you want to go down that aisle control, those are two separate issues. Queuing is controlled by somebody, by the boogeyman or whoever in the sky that wants you to spend more money at the grocery store. And I got nothing against spending more money at the grocery store, but I don't think queuing and user control of the lighting system go together. I think those are separate ideas.
Well, user control would be like on a non-primary space. So this goes back into like event lighting, getting into the theatrical, because you can't give control of the primary for a number of reasons. Um, be it whatever the event might be, a
Hmm.
concert or sports event. Um, but you can affect the ambient or the secondary systems with user-generated controls.
Give me an example.
So, like if you're, the Olympics is probably the best example where you have secondary lighting being like in the spectator seating spaces, and that could be RGB functionality, it could be movers, it could be some sort of thing. So let's say like, we want to highlight a space, but section 121, voted the most votes, and section 121 is highlighted, and they get control to pick, what the color of the space is. So it's things like that, like it's simplistic, but it's user engagement that's not that far away or not that difficult to sort of put into place. Um, all it comes down to is simply mapping the spaces, and then once you have a simple series of maps placed, it's just a step-by-step function of saying, well, A plus B equals C, and so this happens. Um, but that's one way to sort of implement dynamic spaces and make them non-static. So uh, that that's sort of the element of stuff that I've been working on the side here and there. I know we do a lot of different things, but I think that's future tech that we'll see at some point, like implementation. Because again, like lighting as it is in its basic form is a commodity. What you do with it is where the fun part is.
So how did you get? You started in 2014, or Evergreen Applied Technologies started in 2014. Is that correct?
Right. So I
How
was
did you get
I
into
was
it?
doing well. I first was working for a company out of Boulder that ended up going bankrupt, and then that folded into another company, which was eventually sold. And before that sale happened, I was the first employee there. I knew that was going to happen, and so I left and started my own thing. It's sort of self preservation. Um, but we started out as primarily e-commerce, like e-commerce. Back when I was first doing e-commerce, I was in e-commerce as early as 2006, and uh, different things, non-lighting at that point, and then lighting in 2010. And we were one of the very first commercial e-commerce retailers that there was. We had no competition at all, um, and we could sell all sorts of things just left and right. I mean, every day, you could easily sell a 500,000 in a month with your eyes closed because there was literally no competition at that point. Um, and so it was just sort of crazy, like how quickly it exploded. And now there's so many different retailers out there.
Did you ever
Um,
actually sell 500 grand in a month?
oh yeah, yeah, many times.
That's a lot,
Yeah.
man.
Oh yeah, I know. And like basically people just call you up on the phone and say, hey, I want to buy 25 of these, and boom. And also the cost of goods back then, like we were selling LED tubes for $90 a piece,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
it was sort of insane. Like the people would even buy them
Mm-hmm.
because there was no cost benefit at that point. Like you could never reach break even on energy savings. There were rebates to help, for early adopters at that point, but still, it was, it was just the hype of it at that point, what people
Can
wanted to buy.
Can you share the name of that company?
No, I can't. It's I have an NDA there, so,
Got it.
um, but yeah, it was fun to see all that happen, and then with my new company, uh, we sort of evolved because I always enjoyed doing sports and doing projects, and my background from school was sports and then television broadcast, and so I sort of had that element there of understanding it. Um, and we as we got going and doing more project based work, like the e-commerce stuff naturally leads to project based work. It's just inherently they go hand in hand, and I think that's the fear of a lot of major manufacturers, what was formerly the big four, were very apprehensive about opening up the floodgates to e-commerce. And what does that mean for their traditional business model, um, their go to market, and how does it upset that sort of what happens? And so we were always very transparent about pricing. We weren't trying to undercut. um, we weren't trying to steal spec projects away.
How many
um,
orders would you guys get in a day?
uh, it really goes like it's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because contractors don't work on Fridays.
Mhm.
But probably anywhere from 50 to 100 per day. But a lot of times, like because you live in e-commerce, you don't even have to answer the phone. If your stuff is built correctly, you don't have to answer the phone. So it's you could take 20 orders while you're sleeping. Um,
Mhm.
and that's like the big upside of it is that sort of passive revenue stream that you've now created uh, by doing, by doing the legwork in advance and showing people what products are and uh, putting your stuff out there. So it became a big thing, and then like sort of how you guys stumbled upon me was through my Google sort of network of stuff that I do. So I've done some work for Google corporate, um, here and there on the side, and it started in right when COVID happened. We really made a transition and put way more effort into e-commerce than ever before. Just sort of turned it up, and ended up, from that point, we were 60% up, and then this last year we were another 55% up. Um, and it's just massive sales, like of DIYers doing things, and uh, so it really, like, that was a big, I think that was a big turning point for e-commerce, uh, not just in like the resi market, but the commercial market, because you know people were comfortable with buying big stuff. Like before, it was always strange to see like somebody drop 5 grand on an order without calling first, and now it happens more regularly, where it's like, boom, like 9K, and they never even called, and it's
Yeah.
like, wow, like that's a decent sized sale to just put your faith in somebody on the other end. uh, but we've taken orders with credit cards as high as 100K.
Well,
It's sort of like, it's crazy what people will put on a credit card. Um, so but that Google stuff that we did, sort of got us noticed, by Google. I ended up doing some stuff with the CEO of Google, and that got me involved in this sort of bigger thing that's happening out there in the sphere of business, which is this anti-monopoly thing from Google. And I'm a big advocate for them because I've been able to use what I have. And I'm a small business, and we're on the west side of Denver in a small town. Yet we've done sales in,
Hang on.
5 different continents.
Google is against monopolies? Is that what you said?
No, Google's fighting the monopoly from the government crackdown that's happening right now. Like, there were Senate hearings on it, or,
Google is a monopoly. Like
well,
100% a monopoly.
depends how you look at it. Like,
No, it doesn't.
like for me as a small business owner, like, what other way would I have to compete in in a territory outside my own? How could I reach those people? What other platform is there for me to make that connection?
So what you're
I
saying
could
is that Google, I just got to unpack this because it's blowing my mind away.
Sure.
So you're saying that Google does not engage in monopolistic practices over web search.
Well, I'm not
But
going to
you
go that far to say
you
that.
have
Like,
another option on the web to
the
advertise on that's
tools.
realistic.
Well, you could advertise on
Yeah, you
Bing
could always go to
or
Bing that nobody
on
uses.
right, but that's user choice. Like, that's,
Mhm.
Google didn't create that. They just got there by being better. They weren't even the first to market. Netscape beat them there. Um, they were just better. But this, from my standpoint, like, what do I get out of it? I get to reach people I could never reach before.
Sure.
How else could I do that? Um, and I can talk to 100 times more people by doing the way that we do it than the traditional way. Um,
Okay.
there's absolutely no way anybody else can compete
We're
with
never
that.
going to agree on that because I would even go further. I would say that Sundar Pichai is an oligarch, actually, is what I would say. But anyway, so I'd even go further than monopoly. But what I wanted to say was there are more, and this is a kind of a weird kind of aphorism or whatever, there's more potential outcomes in chess, okay, than there are subatomic particles in the universe, okay? But only for someone looking at a chessboard who's never played chess. Okay? So 99.99999% of all the potential moves in chess would never be made by anyone ever playing chess because you play chess to win. And so when you're playing to win, you're eliminating 99.999% of all the different moves that you could possibly do on a chessboard. So only people that don't know how to play chess would make that comment because you would never do it, right? So they say chess is impossibly complicated because of this. Well, that's actually not true. What I'm asking you is, are you like with the AI and sort of this stuff, are you making chess moves that nobody would really make? Or do you think that this is a winning strategy? Some of these ideas that you're coming up with on the fans with the lighting and being able to interact with it. Like, do you think people are actually going to do this?
I think it's I think it's going to happen. It's inevitable that it will happen.
And it's a
One,
lighting play. It's a lighting play.
well, it's a technology play. I think because again, like the lighting part is the simplistic part. Um, there's an engagement level there. Lighting is a necessary function of existence in a commercial environment,
Hmm.
but it's a non-revenue generating thing normally. We're lighting up. It's a function, and if you can change that from a static thing to a dynamic or non-revenue generating to revenue generating, be it however that happens, be it selling advertising or
It happens
displays.
like this. It happens like this. The customer and the product get inverted. So, like for example, when you're Google's customer, the person searching Google is the product, right? That's what they're selling to you, right? So that's an inversion. In the past, if you used a product, you were the customer of the product, right? So if you want to create that element, what you have to do is the people under the lights that are using the lights for visibility or for illumination are the product, and somebody else is getting revenue from that product. That's how that model works, where now and then maybe the light fixtures are free or the lighting system is provided by Google or whoever for free so that they can have the information delivered to them from the people that are in the illumination. That's how that model inverts. I don't think that's
I
practical in the lighting business.
Well, I see it that way, but I also see it as like sort of a side thing, like what sometimes they call a loss leader. Like, are you coming to the space for like the C store is the best example here because it's like, am I coming into the space to buy chips and soda, or am I coming into the space to buy something fantastic? Like there are there are these massive C stores that open up now that are basically like amusement parks, where they have all this other stuff in it. And the sole purpose of those other things is to get people in there to buy the same chips and soda that they were buying 20 years ago. Uh, and
Are
so
they
that's
paying
that's
more
the
for it?
question. Well, probably with inflation, but yeah, I think there is a cost to that, but it's a volume play, and it's also just getting people in there. So but that same example happens, at all sorts of other retail environments where it's like, how do we get people into the store and capture their attention? And it can be as simple as that. So how do we get it? How do we get somebody into the stadium? I think especially with the evolution of sports on TV or sports, on demand, how do we get people into the space? And you've seen stadiums morph from sort of sit down, the old style 50s and 60s ballparks where all you do is you go in there, you sit down, there's a concession stand and there's nothing else. Well, now there's interactive activities everywhere. There's playgrounds for kids, there's, batting cages, different events, and it's all that that sort of fundamental change of getting people into the space to capture more money is essential for those guys to generate revenue.
But
And
Greg,
so
how do we get? I don't see how this is a lighting play. You? I'm trying to figure out how it's a lighting play.
Maybe it's not. I mean, you mentioned the technology before, but you need the lighting itself as a function, as you mentioned, but then you needed the capability to be dynamic. So is it, I guess going back to you, Chris, is it a lighting play? Is it
I
for lighting
think I
people?
think it's part of the lighting play. Like, it's certainly not the only thing. Um, you need other aspects to it. Like in terms of like queuing. You need intelligence to dictate how the queuing happens. There's another function to that. You need a second or a third piece to sort of collectively bring it all together. But the lighting in it, I mean, the one thing, we go back to lighting, like, if it isn't that, let's take the inverse of that. If it isn't that, then what is lighting? Because right now it's a race to the bottom, and it's just a defense against Chinese influx of selling direct into the US market. So if we don't change, what happens to it? Then what happens to lighting? Because right now, as you guys know, if you were at Light Fair a couple of years ago, some of the Chinese brands that were there, without name dropping, had some of the biggest booths that I'd ever seen. And
Well, Chinese companies know how to make light bulbs more than American companies do. I mean,
oh,
that's the
that's so
bottom
true.
line.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like forget about it. They're just way better at making lighting than Americans are. Light
But I
sources and
think the
stuff like
change
that.
the change happened a few years back when they found out they could just set up an entity here in the States and sell direct. And that
No, I don't
really
think
sort of.
that's what it was. I don't really. I disagree with that. I mean, most like Greg and I started a company in 2014 to consult for Chinese companies because we wanted to point out to them that Milky is not frosted. Okay, and
Terminology.
the
Yeah.
U.S. doesn't buy
Yeah,
in but the U.S.
that
doesn't
is
buy
that
in
is
millimeters.
hilarious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the LED Love House is probably not a good name for your company in the United States.
Oh
And
yeah, it's so funny.
your business card says that your name is Warmy Fung. Okay, Warmy is not going to go over too well. Okay, that may translate from
Oh
Chinese
yeah.
as being a nice person, but Warmy is not a name. So we were going to like discuss these things with them, and they weren't interested. And so I think that the Chinese, there's a couple companies that have done it well. TCP is certainly the leader in that realm, Greg.
Hmm.
Of a company that has, but they did that pre-LED. I think the real driver of it was people did not want to bear the capital cost of building a factory in the United States and compete directly with Chinese factories, even with tariffs. And so they
Oh
chose
yeah. The
instead
tariff the tariffs aren't enough to sway
they cho-
that one
they
bit.
chose instead to rebrand or to brand to control and teach manufacturing. And so they Americans literally taught the Chinese how to make lighting. And now the Chinese
Yeah.
have surpassed the Americans.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
that's what happened. And that started in 1979, long before LEDs. I mean, the GE
So
was
the
over
question is,
there.
how does America then take back? If they're selling direct, they're making the product, they're selling the product direct. There is no middleman anymore. There is no middleman rep distributor. Like the distributor are gone out of that equation.
No,
Um,
the vast majority of lighting products are sold under brands that supervise the manufacturing and do quality control. I could list off a ton of them for you. So I would disagree with that statement. But the idea, I'm saying to you, the idea of take back is the wrong idea. That's not. There's no taking back. There's only, can we add value differently, or can we compete in a different way? Taking it back. I mean, nobody wants to. I've been to Chinese factories, okay, where you see how they make LEDs. No American would ever do that job.
oh
Okay.
yeah, never, never. But
Now, if the
what you
process is
just said
completely
is
automated, if the process is completely automated from socket to, the parts go into, Professor Sylvester McMonkey McBean's machine, and they come out on the other end as high quality LED light sources, great. But the way that they manufacture lights in China, Americans would never do those jobs.
oh yeah. Well, they'll get the boards that way. Back to what you were saying though, we'll never take it back, and we need to change what we're doing. Is exactly what I'm saying. Like the commodity stuff that exists, which makes up, the broader 90% of what's sold, 2x4s and strips and all the boring stuff that everybody sells for, 5% margin nowadays. Uh, like, how do you move that stuff and make it more valuable?
I'll
How do
tell
you
you right
bring
now, it's really
value to a
simple.
project?
I'll tell you, it's really simple. So as manufacturing left the United States, okay, from say it started in 1979, okay, and then increased over time till where now it was not 100% America, zero China. Now it's 98% China, 2% America, whatever the number is, okay, whether it's 80%, okay. When you used to make light fixtures in the past, their life cycle was 40 years. Okay, you would buy a light fixture, and it would be installed and it would last, and you would change the light source and it would last. And now you can track that against Chinese manufacturing so that now a light fixture's life cycle is what, Greg? 5 to 7 years?
At best, a lot of them.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So what we're doing is we're importing future e-waste from China, non-maintainable. You can't fix it, and so on and so forth. And we're creating all this stuff.
That's absolutely so true. And so we then have to turn and resell, in that 7 to 10 year timeline. I think that was the early misconception about LED was that, it was always advertised, 100,000 hours, 200,000. I've seen some stuff, as I'm sure you have, 400,000 hours, 500,000 hours. Like
Yeah.
there's just no way that that's ever going to hit that.
I like the best way
And
to describe an LED fixture to somebody is to say whether it's a fixture or a tube, it lasts between 2 and 4 times of a fluorescent tube life. That's
yeah,
it.
well, if it's built correctly,
If it's built
it's
correctly, it's 2 to 4
yeah.
times a fluorescent tube life.
If they decide, I've been to several manufacturers, some of them true manufacturers and some of them just assemblers, and it's shocking to see how few people use thermal interface material. Like, if you want to dissipate heat, if you want to build a product that is of higher quality, like that is something that's essential to making it last. And it's just, cheapening the product. And as I heard from a publicly traded company CEO, they don't care. It's 5 years. Like they got to go 5 years and they're good with that. Like 5 year warranty. Anything past that, they don't
Yeah, but
care.
okay, so in the past, Greg, you'll know the answer to this. The fluorescent lamp warranty or the HID lamp warranty was 2 or 3 years, and the ballast warranty was 5 years. But the life cycle of the fixture, think about this. This affects accounting principles, Chris, because when you take a capital expense, if you buy your lighting system outright for a building, it becomes a part of real property as an asset, and it's depreciated over a period of 20 years, right? Somebody's got to tell these bean counters that, hey, light fixtures don't last that long anymore, bro. You got to depreciate that over 3 to 5 years because you're going to be changing those fixtures again. But guess what? If the industry was actually honest about that, nobody would buy those lights.
Yeah, I totally agree. I absolutely agree with you. I see it now in sports. Like we sell these projects, and people go, well, what's the timeline on this project or the payback on this project? And I'm always very honest about it. And I say, you'll never hit payback. It's never going to happen.
You're talking about
Like
are you talking about an arena lighting system?
arena, a rec ball field, a rec soccer
Yeah,
field,
there's
whatever
no
it is.
energy play there. There's no
There's no
energy play.
energy savings.
No.
And they say, well, what about the maintenance savings? I'm like, well, you're never going to, when are you ever going to need to go up there and change it? So you're going to pay, $100,000+ more for this system. And you could have bought the HID system for a fraction of that cost. And the HID system is still going to go 25 to 30 years. And your cost to maintain, buy another bulb or a ballast, it's minimal. And so, yeah, it's a total, sort of bait and switch, but
So the
again,
reason,
like
one of the
this is my
reasons
industry.
why,
We
well,
need to
I mean,
sell
this
light
is the Get a
fixtures.
Grip on Lighting podcast, right?
Right.
So,
We're here to sell light fixtures.
no, we're not.
Yep.
We're here to discuss the lighting industry and its problems.
No, I mean like
I got some fixtures to
my
sell to
company
you if you're
though.
buying.
No, I
Right.
just mean like my company. Like
Okay.
we sell light fixtures, but at the end of the day, like I will be honest with people about it. Like, because they're at the end of the life cycle of their T5s or T8s or whatever it is that they have. Like, are we going to sell them another HID fixture? No, we don't even sell them. Like, that's not even an option for us.
I
So
don't
we're
even
gonna
know if
sell
anyone
them.
knows how to make those fixtures anymore.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
yeah,
what we should do. Go back
there's
to
a
the HID
handful of
production.
people still that still have them.
Yeah.
But that it's getting
Sure.
harder and harder to find this stuff.
Well, there's the
Um,
talk of banning mercury across the board in lighting. So,
yeah,
you know,
that would kill it.
yeah. So
Um,
but like, I go back to the whole bean counter thing. If people actually, it wasn't a misconception, the life cycle. Those were deliberately overestimated.
Oh
Okay?
yeah, totally.
Like deliberately overestimated. And I can point to some leaders, I'm not going to say their names because, I know who they are, that
Sure.
deliberately overestimated the life cycle of their fixture, the lifetime of the light source. Like it was
Well,
deliberate.
I asked a
They had no, okay, or at a minimum, Greg and Chris, at a minimum, they had no way of knowing if it was actually ever going to last that long.
well because
That's the,
they never ran tests to find out.
yeah.
They never ran any
No.
TM21 tests. Like
I'm sure they
it
ran.
was
No, I disagree with you on that. I'm sure there was some testing done. Okay. Okay.
trashed after.
Accelerated testing or whatever,
Yeah.
right? But nothing replaces. Okay, when I say two or three fluorescent two or three fluorescent lamps, that is 50 to 100,000 hours. Okay, right? That's what I'm talking about. Now, does any Greg? I remember I got an email from a manufacturer way back in 2004, and it was an email from a major, and it said, "We now have a T5HO that lasts 50,000 hours." My response back was,
I
"Make one that
remember
lasts
this. Yeah.
25,000 hours first." Right?
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, I was having so much trouble with T5HO burning out and warranty failures and all this kind
Well,
of thing.
wasn't that the 3 hour? You can only run them 3 hours a
Yeah.
This
day
is what
sort
I'm
of scenario.
talking
Yeah.
Yep.
about.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I
Exactly.
remember that.
We've changed the mathematical formula for the hour rating of our product. That's the real
Well,
announcement.
the other thing I find is that people, and this goes back into fluorescent, and then that sort of short gap we had there with induction and now LED was the there are two numbers that exist. There's the driver number, and then there's the light source number. And
Mhm.
I usually see the light source number as the advertised number. So that's that
Yeah.
200,000 number. And
Mhm.
as I talked to one manufacturer, I was like, well, you're telling me that your product is better, so you can sell for a premium, and it's 200,000 hours, but you're still only throwing a 5-year warranty on it. What's the disconnect there? And it's the driver. The driver won't go. The drivers at above 70C fall off a cliff. Like they cannot function.
Neither will
And
the
and
LEDs. The LEDs will never
well,
last that long either.
some LEDs,
That's
like you can really push them. It depends on, again, this gets back to thermal interface material, and like the testing that
No,
I've
the
done with
entire industry
LED.
was doing two opposing things at the same time, which is like a magic trick done by, you want to buy the letter I? We're going to
Yeah.
increase the lumens per watt and tell you they last longer. Those two things don't go together. Okay? When you drive, I don't care what technology you do, when you drive LEDs to push more light out, there's no way that you can increase the life of them. I'm sorry. Now you make incremental improvements on how those LEDs work and heat sinks and everything else, but the idea of increasing lumens per watt and increasing lifetime are two competing things. They don't go together.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you're trying to push, what's now like, theoretical, upwards of 300 lumens per watt, you're gonna burn stuff. Like, it's just too hot, and then to try to compact that, as we always do in lighting, we're trying to fit the most amount of light in the smallest amount of
Mm-hmm.
space,
Sure.
and combining, an intense heat source, which is what light is, into a small space is just not functional. And this is another thing I find too. This is sort of off on a tangent. Like DLC and UL, like they tell us that the
Uh-oh.
product won't catch fire, or DLC will tell us what the lumens per watt is, but it doesn't tell us if it's actually a good product.
Right.
Like, will it fail? Like,
Okay,
tell me if
so
this product will fail, when it's sitting
the
over a
DLC
parking
has
lot in
no
Arizona.
interest. There's no interest at the DLC. See, here's the misconception exactly. When people bought, what happened was the branding in the industry collapsed. The DLC emerged as the major brand in the lighting industry, and it didn't matter what the brand was as long as it was DLC on the QPL. And I believe customers thought QPL stood for Quality Products List. but it does not
I'd
stand for
never
that.
heard. Yeah, I've never heard that, but yeah,
It actually stands for qualified
makes.
products list,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think
Yep.
clients were thinking, oh, QPL, yeah, it's the quality products list, right? They had no idea about quality whatsoever. They weren't even measuring it.
No.
And
It,
I mean the DLC, and I mean they're good folks down there. They work hard. They are from the beginning of this whole thing. They were way out of their league. Greg, I mean, is that fair to say? They had no idea what was going to happen. Their labels were being put on things based on lumens per watt, and customers were taking that. And I'm telling them how their brand reacted in the market. Customers reacted to that DLC, and utilities yet reacted to that DLC, thinking that that meant that was like a CUL or a CSA
yeah.
or
A
or
seal of
UL for
approval
quality
for.
product.
Yeah.
That it was the warranty was good and everything else, and that the DLC was never about that, but that's what customers thought it was about.
Well, and what's ironic now, though, is back to your point, though, the lumen per watt, the higher we push the lumen per watt, the better the rating on
Yeah.
DLC, which inherently means the worse the product is going to perform, likely. It's it's like this oxymoron of stuff that exists. But
Magicaloo, da bibbity doo, da bibbity bobbity boo. Put them together, and
so
what do you got? Bibbity bobbity boo.
so we're I don't know. I feel like I'm fighting this battle of like trying to be honest and transparent about things, but at the same time we have to sell light fixtures. Like,
No,
Yeah.
but how do we do
wrong,
it in the most?
wrong. You got to be
Well, we
honest.
Well,
don't. Well,
that's what
no.
he's saying.
I mean
You
like
got to
at the
sell.
same,
Yeah.
disclosing what what I actually think of it, and
You
I've
don't
taken many
try.
a light fixture apart.
There's no trying.
Yeah.
I'm Yoda right now. No trying. You be
Well,
honest all the
here's
time,
the
Chris.
here's the issue with e-commerce though is that you only have typically 80 characters to make a connection. Like that's your, if you guys go online and you want to buy something, you're like, I want to buy a 2x4 chopper. You pick the lowest priced one. You read the title of it. It's 2x4, 60 watt, multi wattage chopper. Boom, sold. Like that's what 90% of people who buy that product, that's all they read. Like
Well,
they read that first title, and if it meets the parameters of what they're looking for and the
Well,
price is
that's
okay,
their
they bought
problem
it.
then. That's
I
not
know,
your
but that's what I'm
problem.
saying is the issue of like
Look,
how
if
do
you
we
listen, if
be
somebody's
more.
online, listen, if you're buying online and you're buying $100,000 lights without calling somebody, that's your problem. But Chris, we've gone 40 minutes here. Greg's got to go to Winnipeg. I don't know why anyone would go to Winnipeg. Okay,
It's
in
minus 10
January, I
there right
don't
now.
know. That's not a
it's
good
fishing.
idea.
It's fishing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But you
We'll
know
try
what?
it.
Before we go, I want to thank all the listeners, Chris. But before we get into all that, Greg, we got to go back to the gangsters, buddy. Go to satco.com, buddy. SATCO.com. Still printing catalogs sitting on Chris Lewis's desk. He's not cruising the internet. He's pulling out that Satco catalog, nice and papery. He's flipping through it, Greg. You love those catalogs, and so do
I
I.
do actually. It's something that's
They
different that you don't get from a lot of other people, and they sit there and you can look at them and you can sell based on
they're
that,
one
right?
of the few
Ooh,
who actually still put the effort
they're
out
the only ones,
to make a
baby.
Yep,
catalog. Yeah.
Yeah.
definitely.
So go to
So
satco.com, get your catalogs. And they got tons of them. I was in the room where they make them in the marketing department where they print them out right there. Love those Satco catalogs. That's satco.com. And of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, GregNALD.org. Get associated, get educated. And of course, Chris Lewis, thanks for being with us today. You can check out all Chris's social. Yeah, he's got LinkedIn. He's got a bunch of things here. We'll put it up on the getagriponlighting.com website if you're interested in all that. And of course, if you made it to the end, all you colleagues out there that don't have a podcast, we love you guys and gals. So stay with us. Coming out hot for 2022. We're doing our conversation series. That's right. There's other people that are going to record Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. That should be fun. There's one already out. So check it out. But for now, thanks for listening.